All right, so we should be live now. Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to another expert session number 85. And today we have the second time Hendrik Lovscher, who's now a friend. Hendrik is the founder and chief analyst of Blue Cape Ventures, a boutique strategy consultancy focused on global e-commerce, marketplaces, and cross-border commerce. He has a significant experience in emerging markets, especially Africa, and works with platforms and investors to understand structural shifts in commerce. His weekly newsletter around the world in commerce is followed by executives and investors for its sharp global market insight and global market insight. Outside work, he's someone who asks the simple why questions many executive teams ignore. Just before we start, I want to say thanks to our sponsors. So VTEX, the commerce platform powering global retail experiences, eDesk, AI customer support solution built for e-commerce teams, PagBank, a Brazilian fintech offering payments, banking, and financial services, and Airmeet, of course, the platform enabling our global virtual and hybrid events. Hendrik, we're going to go through the newsletter, but as
Yes.
always, we have the controversial opening question, and the controversial opening question, the controversial question, opening question for you is: the industry keeps saying AI will destroy physical retail and deliver endless convenience. Yet your newsletter points to unions, labor tensions, and early morning logistics as major friction points. So when growth and tech race ahead, is the human cost simply postponed, or is the traditional retail fulfillment model fundamentally broken?
So, Carlos, firstly, thanks for having me again. What you have just asked me is a question that I've had in my mind, I'd say, for the last 4, 5, 6 months, in the sense that we we have a very clear situation happening, and that is that in North America, we have this whole hype cycle, bubble, whatever you want to call it, in which agentic AI commerce is the future. Yet, if you look outside of the US and you look at a larger market like China or a smaller market like India, agentic commerce doesn't exist. They
Mhm.
and in India they did a trial where people could test this with an OpenAI did a trial with a local Indian payments platform. So here's the thing that I always come back to, and this is most probably it's not a hot take, but it's just something that I always think about as a frame of reference. And that is that in 1999, venture capital investors in Silicon Valley said that e-commerce was going to kill retail. 26 years later on, now we have a new solution, silver bullet, whatever you want to call it, saying that this is going to make and change things again forever. I believe very strongly that we will never get to a place in the next decade where there will be no shops. And I think also the important thing is that we also, as a sector, need to realize that not everybody is going to want to have an agent because of privacy concerns, because of accuracy, because of data, data as well as all the challenges that normal commerce provides brands, sellers, markets, as well as consumers. So I try to look at the world in a global view. And with the exception of China, where the local marketplace platforms have invested in AI to make their platforms more efficient and to drive more conversions, uh, I think we are going to see more labor stories. We are going to see more challenges with commerce, but we're not going to see this thing disappear. But I think it is going to make it more efficient in the sense that it potentially could lead to the end of impulse buying, I believe. But other than that, I just think that we all need to take a very deep breath because we have investors that are creating the narrative for that.
Sure. Thanks for that. So in your newsletter, there are a few, let's say, major topics that you cover, right? So
Yeah,
physical stores and agentic commerce, labor, logistics and structural tension, marketplaces and cross-border, luxury, premium and resale, advertising, payment and agentic models, and personal and some strategic, maybe um, um, uh, perspectives or
yeah.
perspectives that you share there. Not sure if we can go through all of it, but taking what you just shared, that there's always a narrative, always like there's always some bullshit there. We all know it, and again, the reasons, like how I think about the big events. Like there's almost never truth, right? It's always a PR stunt because
Mm-hmm.
they need to look good, so they need to go
Mm-hmm.
with the narrative.
Yeah.
So in your latest newsletter, you said that the first question you highlight is Amazon CEO saying AI will accelerate the end of stores. Yet Amazon is partnering with third-party AI shopping agents. So how do you interpret that contradiction?
So firstly, do I have enough time? But in all seriousness, I think there's a consistent thing that I believe that people get wrong about Amazon, in the sense that if you look at the US publications, Reuters, Business Insider, Financial Times, whoever you want to note, there's this narrative that Amazon is behind in AI. I totally disagree with that. I just think they're doing it differently. So that's point number one. Point number two, Amazon has, in its entire history, always been a fast follower. So what I mean with that is that Amazon does not do first mover. It's never done it. It never will do it because that's not their culture. So why is Amazon doing what they are doing? And so one, they are negotiating in public with all of these platforms to ensure that they get deals and agreements that is mutually beneficial for them. Secondly, Amazon is the only company in the world that has purchasing data that is linked to advertising data. So it makes total sense that Amazon will essentially block every agent from Perplexity all the way through to OpenAI because they want to do this. The thing is that I believe that Amazon is currently testing how it's going to rule or run out agentic commerce. So let's just state the obvious here. Amazon has an AI assistant that sits inside their app. It's called Rufus. Sounds like a play toy that you give a child, but that's a story for another day. But Rufus is designed to help people make decisions. I increasingly think that agentic commerce is going to be focused on sectors where there is very large amounts of research and engagement required from from the customer to buy it. So think about it like this. What is one of the sectors that I always find interesting is the apparel clothing sector. You cannot buy clothing online and not worry about sizing. You don't.
Mhm.
If you are telling me that you're buying online clothing and you are not worried about whether the item is going to fit you, you either know that the platform you are buying from has uh, great returns, or you believe that you're getting what you're being sold. The fact remains for me, and I honestly believe this, is that Amazon has said that we have the most trusted brand in the world, and we are not going to jeopardize that at any cost. So we will spend heavily. They spent, I don't know how many billions of dollars with Anthropic, and they are now going to generate $36 billion from OpenAI's partnership with them. Amazon is not an online retailer. we need to get that conversation ended because they are not. They are a technology company that has logistics that can be used as a
Mhm.
service by others and themselves, as well as a technology platform that they want to offer the entire world to build stuff on. Hello, Amazon Web Services. So they want to basically get a cut of the action the entire time, no matter what it does with regards to commerce on the internet.
Brandon, it's your first time here, and I like you also to take advantage of this space. Yeah, and you mentioned you were talking to in the backstage, asking him a few questions to Hendrik. So the stage is yours. I won't even put it into contest. Just ask, fire away.
Yeah, well, actually, Hendrik mentioned Rufus, and I was just looking up some stats there as we were chatting. So I think Amazon have just released a stat that Rufus is responsible for 10 billion in incremental sales this year. Now, I don't know what percentage of sales that accounts for Amazon, and so, but 10 billion in sales, right? In anyone's language, whether you're Amazon or anyone else, is a lot of money to be, let's say, supported by agentic. Well, it's or AI. So I'm just curious in terms of Henrik, are we already there? It's already working for someone like Amazon, and they're going to keep obviously investing in that. So is it? Do you think we're already there, or is it still early days?
So, if I ask anybody in the sector, were we awaiting CEO Andy Jassy telling us that they have $10 billion in incremental revenue coming from? No, nobody saw this coming. This is Amazon being Amazon, and that is that they control the narrative. The thing is, think about it like this. Sam Altman from OpenAI has been on podcasts and he's been in the press, and he gets really nervous and upset when journalists ask him about the revenue that OpenAI is going to make. Are you really telling me, Brendan, that every potential customer on Amazon has used Rufus? No, that's not the case. This is Amazon playing the long game, but they're signaling to the entire market, everybody, that we are going to be a big deal. We are going to be a big deal in this sector. But I think also the other thing that they are saying is that we're open for business. And if you are a brand or you are you're one of these third-party agentic platforms, Perplexity, insert whatever name, they are saying to them, guys, we are generating revenues, because the big challenge is that what is the biggest challenge that all of these companies have? These OpenAI companies, well, sorry, not OpenAI companies, but all these companies, including OpenAI, they've raised billions of dollars, but their revenue numbers is stagnant with regards to the amount of capital that they've raised. So I view this as Amazon pretty much putting down a marker in the sand in saying that we are going to be a big deal of this conversation. But the other thing also is, and I want to just extrapolate on the open for business comment that I made, in the sense that Amazon has the greatest logistics network in the United States. I don't think that's a discussion anymore. I just think that's fact. I think they are investing significantly in logistics all over the world to ensure that they can offer these platforms the opportunity to partner with them. Because if you look at the release notes of all of these agents, all of them are not the seller of record. They are literally all wanting to take a commission/affiliate fee for a successful transaction on their platform. But they don't want to manage customer service. They don't want to deal with returns. They don't want to do anything of that. So it's almost like we are back at the beginning of commerce, where the preferred business model is affiliates, where people are generating revenues from people clicking through and converting to a sale. It's amazing for me to feel like 25 years later on, we're back at where it was. But I just think everybody needs to understand that Amazon is in a really strong position here. And I think they are going to be very mindful with who they partner, and it's going to be on their terms. Because I always tell clients, and I don't mind sharing it on this conversation today, is that I view Amazon as the best negotiating company in e-commerce. Whether they are buying your business, whether you are wanting to become a partner of theirs, whatever you want from them, they will get the better of it. They will get the better deal of it because that's who they have been for since they found it.
Can I ask you if you were recommending to your clients or to, let's say, D2C brands, because
Yes.
the marketplaces will do what they do, right? But if I'm a D2C
Yes,
brand, should I be investing in agentic AI to support a sales process? Actually, I'll do it. I have to do a disclosure. Carl, I didn't realize one of your sponsors is eDesk, so I used to work with eDesk, and it's just an interesting topic, Henrik. So regardless of that, but one of the topics that came up for eDesk, it's let's say a live chat customer service solution, is a lot of service conversations happen pre-sale. Okay, a lot of interactions with the team, especially on complex products, like if it's a complex technical product, and it's questions around the specifications of a product, etc., right? So actually, agentic AI in principle can really help, or sorry, let's say AI, not even agentic, let's say, but like AI can help in principle with a lot of that pre-sale, supporting the sales process.
Yeah.
And I guess my question to you is, like, what's your advice to D2C brands in terms of investing in AI, pre-sales, sales support, like Rufus or whatever, right? Yeah. So what are you recommending there?
So I recommend that brands should be looking at their traffic to see whether they are getting referral links from any of these LLMs. I think you should be, as a DTC brand, you should be looking at platforms that can help you get your content into the LLM to ensure that customers can find. We are at the place where brands have another master to pay to ensure that they can be found inside an LLM. I believe that you should be doing tests. So when you tell me about customer service, tell me about knowledge networks, do you like knowledge documentation, all of those things pre-sale, you should be testing AI bots or AI solutions to make sure that your human operators or humans that work for you are having to spend their time on real situations. The biggest challenge that I've seen, and I've experienced this myself very recently with a software company, is that a lot of these customer service solutions, they essentially regurgitate you back to, the help section of the website. So you're entering an infinite loop, which is not the best thing for customer service. But to answer your question outright, Brendan, you should be, as a brand, if you are doing, I believe, any amount of sales, you should be testing whether you can automate things, number one. I think also that if you are in a sector that there's high consideration for it, so apparel, luxury, things where people need to make decisions because it's a high ticket item, I think you should be investing to ensure that people can find you. I genuinely do that. And I think I know of one company, I'm not an investor nor am an advisor. I know of one company that's based in Europe, Azoma, which is helping multinationals get their content into these LLMs. And these people are paying that company significant amount of money to ensure that. to our conversation that we had in the green room, I think we need to be mindful that this is another channel. And you need to decide as the brand, do I want to put all my eggs in this basket? Or do I want to test this consistently? I'm telling my clients that, one, we are testing, we are looking at data, we are not, if your business is outside the US at the moment, I think you have at least another 6 months before you have to have this conversation. But if you are a DTC business in the United States and you have a situation where your SaaS provider, Shopify, has a deal with OpenAI, I think you just need to you need to understand that your products are now totally findable, and you now need to ensure that your product data and all the things that customers are going to find about you leads to a conversion. Because I mentioned the conversion as a big deal, because I think we are moving advertising away from being impression driven to conversion driven.
I was at the side event, the same co-working space that I'm
Yep.
sitting in today. And one of the topics that the entrepreneurs they spoke about, it was a side event about global expansion. Some entrepreneurs
Yep.
there, actually most of them, they were doing D2C into the US, and one guy was B2B company.
Yep.
But one of the guys said, it's because in my opinion, what we are speaking in the end here is about search and how
Yep.
going to change, right? It's all about search. So commerce and search are completely correlated. So the way people look for a product is changing. I mean, I barely use Google nowadays. Like I'm mostly relying on ChatGPT, and it's quite odd. Like it took me a year, but there was a complete transformation in my behavior. Now Google, I see myself using Google maybe for trips, checking tickets and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
For my day to day, LinkedIn posts and everything that I'm doing, I'm relying on ChatGPT, and of course for search as well. So I was just checking some data on Perplexity while you guys were speaking. So in the end, Hendrik, I think
Yes.
what we are speaking here is it's about search. Whether you're a B2B company or a D2C company, we're talking about a new paradigm, right? And how
Yep.
people search and of course Google, in again, they're going to move, they're going to do something like just like you were saying, that Amazon controls the narrative. Google also, like all these big tech companies, they had the control over the
Mm-hmm.
narrative. So they might be doing something as well, right? So what's your take in terms of search and how things are going to change, and how this big behemoths also are going to take action,
So
not only
what
from a
was
customer's perspective, because this is about search. This is a bigger topic, in my opinion.
it is, and I think what you've just explained is the challenge that brands are facing with, in the sense that I'm yet to find a brand that loves the search solution that they are using on their website. I'm being serious. It is generally always a concern. Secondly, what these large language models and such as OpenAI and ChatGPT and everybody, what they're essentially doing is, I think we are going into an era where natural language searching is going to be the norm. So it's almost gonna be conversational. But I also think that what this means is that our interfaces are going to change. I think voice is going to become a big deal. I think um, cues to help people find what they need, I think, is going to become way more important, because with these models, you can do association. You can basically continuously learn from what the consumer is doing to ensure that they get to the last stage of the funnel. So to answer your thought, I believe that search as we knew it pre ChatGPT and LLMs, it won't return. Um, I think one of the biggest challenges that the consumer is sitting with today is that we have all these models and all these different services, but I think people are trying to figure out which one is the best one for what situation. So if I'm going to
Mhm.
do a search for an airline, like Carlos, what you do most probably often, because I often tease you about your traveling and you're walking in airport, in airport, sorry. That I think you're going to do in one place. You're going to do your product search on another place. I just think that this AI world is going to have a huge impact on advertising
Mhm.
because people will not have the patience. But also, I believe very strongly that with LLMs, this is placing the pressure firmly back on brands and on these marketplace platforms where they are going to be way more dependent on product data, on various API endpoints. All these kinds of things are now becoming critical to ensure that a machine can find whatever the customer is asking for. So to put your initial comment just one step further, I think I always note things generally go a certain way. So first, the innovation it happens in advertising, then it goes into so then it goes into retail, and then it goes into finance. So I think advertising as we knew it and how people buy media and how you buy advertising for products online is going to be severely different. I think, as I said, and I continue to come back to this point, agentic commerce is another channel to ensure that customers can find your products. But I think brands will need to be very mindful about where the customer is. Because as I always say, I sit on the African continent, and I can tell you that you will have a select few markets such as Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Morocco, Tunisia. These markets will have people and customers using LLMs, but a large part of the continent will not be able to do this because this is way above their day to day, because they walk rather to a store down the road to buy what they are needing. So what I'm trying to say in my long-winded way as usual is that the onus now falls on the brand to ensure that they know where the customer is. Are they in a market where there's, you know, all these great tools, or are you in a developing market where we are still trying to solve the basics of e-commerce? And all these AI things are literally just it's we're not even there yet. And I can just tell you, so if I do a chat GPT search or a Gemini search or a Perplexity search to look to buy goods, so I do a general search, something along the lines of, I need to buy shoes because I walk my Jack Russell every day, or I try to. But I know that I've got a specific pattern in which my feet hit the ground, and I need to buy shoes to ensure that there's more covering on the outside of the sole. One, if I do a search currently from where my location is, the LLMs don't return product URLs to me, not at all. In most cases, they are going to be returning large content pieces about what you need to consider pre-purchase and all of those things. So I think we all need to just be very mindful that this race to AI is going to be like something akin to Web3, in the sense that this is going to be a percentage point of your customer base, but it's not
Mhm.
going to be all your customers.
I agree, but that also means that there's an opportunity there to experiment, right? And I
Correct.
mean that was the discussion yesterday. Like the guys, they were saying, this is the time. In the US, it's already happening, just like you said. But this is the time if you're in Europe to perhaps hire like an SEO consultant and try to rank in whatever, like a GPT or Perplexity, because they're different as well. So, but this is the time because there could be consumers there,
Yeah,
looking for products just the way
yeah,
you're saying, right?
exactly. And I think that is once again the opportunity. This is how the world works. Generally,
Hmm.
the phases of maturity differs per market. So the most advanced market for LLM-based commerce, I believe, at the moment is the United States. Then
Sure.
thereafter, it's a discussion based on data. So the point for me is if you're an entrepreneur sitting in the African continent or in Latin America or in India or in Southeast Asia or wherever, this is an opportunity for you to use AI tools to get your products in front of others. But I think what this will also inherently do is I think we are going to see considerably more cross border buying because of the fact that people can find products easier. Because I think we also need to admit as a sector that Google's product search has significantly gone backwards. And it's really hard to find products on Amazon because of all the advertising. So if you use a ChatGPT or any of these LLMs, the experience is much cleaner. So the opportunity for smaller brands to disrupt large brands, I think is truly there. But I also think that the other thing and this is something that I'm currently researching and looking at, and that is I'm looking for vertical specific solutions to
Hmm.
help brands make sense of it, because the challenge with retail is that people believe online commerce is a commodity. It is, but the challenge is that you can't sell a piece a piece of uh, material the same way that you sell a $20,000 um,
Hmm.
LVMH bag. So I think that's where these pockets of opportunity are. But I continue to come back to the place where I think there's so many things for brands to fix before this. We need to ensure that brands actually understand that, you need to do the basics well. And I think brands and businesses that have executed on the fundamentals of commerce, I think they're going to be in a golden position.
Thanks very much. Let's move on to something else. So, Brandon, it's your first time here. I think I sent you the topics, right? So feel free to pick a topic and let's pick the brain of this
Yeah.
incredible gentleman. If it's luxury, marketplaces, whatever you want to know. That's
Ask away.
Cool. No, like I'm finding this fascinating because I think, Hendrik, I know in different, let's say in different continents,
Yep.
the challenges are different, but I'm broad brush strokes, but in the developing market, I think sometimes, like for example, my perception of the African continent is that they bypassed the whole desktop kind of
Correct.
era and went straight to mobile.
Yep.
Um, I feel like to Carlos's point, and I'm not doing it a lot for researching products, but actually, I'm starting to do it more. But I suspect there will be a generation of shoppers who come through
for sure.
will bypass
Yep.
like search, like traditional search, and just
Yep.
go straight to and so if even 5% of your customers are coming from LLMs, right?
Yep.
Does that not already push it higher up the agenda? Because what I'm hearing from you is actually, obviously, of course, some geographies have more fundamental issues.
Yep.
But is there is it the opportunity to overcome or to leapfrog the rest of the market, right? And just get ahead. I don't know. Like, let's assume forget about the fundamental issues because you have to solve those. But it's a bit like some kids only buy on TikTok Shop. They only buy stuff they see on TikTok Shops. There'll be another generation that will only buy things because the only place they go looking to buy things is on ChatGPT. So just your thoughts on that.
So I think a few things. One, I think the analog for what you have described is what happened in China, in the sense that China's retail sector was fairly underdeveloped.
Yeah.
It didn't solve customer problems. And platforms like JD.com, Alibaba, and others saw an opportunity for them to move ahead. I do agree with you on your thought that we will have a generation of customers that shop differently. This is what happens every every few decades. But I think the one thing that I keep coming back to is that, and this is for me a major issue, which I don't think we are talking about or thinking about very progressively, is that when you are you buying from ChatGPT or Perplexity or insert whoever's you're using, how do you know that you're getting the best answers for your questions? I'm concerned about privacy. I've always been, and I think, if we've learned anything from social media, is that social media has amplified negativity and things that have basically made and swayed people in the wrong manner. Will these LLMs provide you the opportunity to will these LLMs provide you the opportunity to ask for a reset? So I am no longer interested in buying, you know, a specific brand because I've had a bad experience. I think that's the question. I also think that the challenges this place on attribution is mind blowing. But I keep coming back to a simple point, and that is that consumers want access to the best deals, the lower prices. But here's the thing that no one's talking about, and that is that, do we know that whether there's an alignment of incentives between a buyer and a seller with agentic? I don't think so. I think if you use an agent to sell, the agent will want to sell the product at the highest price with the best margins and with the most profits. Whereas the consumer's agent will want the lowest price and basically with the fastest delivery. So that's a situation that we need to talk about. But I also think that we are very early. And if there's anything that I've learned in commerce is that there's always companies and entrepreneurs that are very smart doing things that certain companies are leveraging and what not. The one concern that I've had thus far, so we're in November, the companies that I've seen and spoken to in the AI space, I would say 70% of them in the commerce space are rebuilding things from that's already existed. Comparison shopping, all those things. We need newer things that leverage marketplaces. Let me just also add, I think LLMs complement marketplaces. I don't think it's an either or. I genuinely believe that. I'm going to stop here for a minute because I want to give Carlos the opportunity to take the conversation in another way. Carlos, where do you want to go, sir?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Just perhaps to so we can move on. I almost have nausea about this AI topic now. Like, seriously, like you're here at Web Summit, and it lacks substance. Like people talk about AI, but it's just like, okay, and so what? So, I think I make more of my time listening to a podcast, like, which is long form, because here it's everything is shallow. Like, how can you learn something in 15 minutes? And again, when you're looking at the solutions, like yesterday I spent some time talking to a few solution providers. There's real interesting stuff, but there's also perhaps a need for, and that's a challenge. Now I'm sharing a challenge that I'm having at Web Summit. It's massive. I don't really have time to watch all the tracks and sessions, but again, a lot of them are 15 minutes. I don't think you can go deep enough. So have learning, and when it comes to to the solutions, I think curation. If someone can find a solution to help you curate what's going on, and that's in life in general, right? Because there's so much of everything. It's like going to a supermarket. You don't even know where to start. So you're gonna go with what you know, whether
Yeah.
it's AI, So I think that's my personal challenge. That's how I feel. Like you're bombarded with headlines and all, but when it comes to the substance and the actual meat, if you know what I mean, like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's real hard. I don't know if you have the same feeling. And then we go to the next topic.
So what you are communicating is exactly what I feel. I think we
Mm-hmm.
are getting the hopes and dreams pictures,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the reality is very far from it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the biggest challenge is that I mentioned the investor world, the venture capital, private equity. Obviously, they're going to throw a lot of money in this. Obviously, they are going to be feeling that they don't want to lose out. So, to your point, there is a lot of information, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to find. I believe that there are certain things that we need to be honest about. Does anybody know how agentic commerce looks? The answer for me is a resounding no. I'm sorry, it's a no. Number two,
Mm-hmm.
do we know what use cases are the best for AI in e-commerce and retail? I don't think we have an idea at the moment, because if we look at
Mm-hmm.
the evolution of technology in retail, we still can't figure out how to send somebody to the right aisle in a large grocer to find the items
Mm-hmm.
that they want to buy. I still am going to the shop close to me, and I'm still getting to a place where there's an empty shelf. So
Mm-hmm.
let's move on. But I do think it's important to note what you've noted, because and that's why I encourage people to join Evolve. You should be reading wide. You should be asking questions. Carlos, you're a subscriber to my newsletter. You know that almost bi-weekly I ask readers to come contact me, disagree with me, tell me what your thoughts are, because at the end of the day, I don't want us to have this follow culture where only certain people's points of view, matter. It should be the case that brands should be speaking with the platforms. The platforms should be speaking with the marketplaces. This isn't, I come back to the point that I said earlier. This is not an either or. This is an and.
Agreed.
E-commerce and LLM, e-commerces and agents. Anyway, let's move on.
All right, so let's talk about luxury, premium, and resale. So, in the luxury commerce section, you highlight the asset sale of the Outnet and brands extending resale partnership, which is actually something quite interesting. Now, the whole resale sustainability topic again. So, what does that tell us about how premium commerce is being re-architected?
So, yeah, so that's a very complicated topic that you have just asked. So here's the thing that I think people need to be aware of. All of these luxury brands, they have a challenge. And the challenge is that in most cases, if not all cases, they don't own the resale. The resale is happening on third-party platforms, and it is
Mm-hmm.
to brands having lawsuits against these said platforms because they believe that they are fakes and all the counterfeit products being sold. So that's number one. Number two, I think we need to be very blunt about the fact that luxury at the moment is really hard online. And
Mm-hmm.
we have a situation where we need to be mindful of the fact that Lux Experience is trying to sell as much of the assets from Hughes Net-a-Porter it bought because they are trying to turn the business around. We've seen something very similar happen when Coupang in South Korea acquired Farfetch, in the sense that there was like a rationalization that happened of the assets because everybody wants to be everything for everybody. I think the biggest challenge that luxury retail has, and I might be having a controversial take here, but I think a fair degree of luxury shouldn't be online. I just don't believe that's the case. I don't think the online model works for certain parts of luxury. because it shouldn't be commoditized. It shouldn't be available. The reason why fashion shows and luxury work is because there is supply and demand characteristics. And that is not able to be done because of online. You can find anything online. I think the biggest challenge remains is that these luxury platforms have these amazing reputation, amazing products, but that it is very focused on certain places in the world. And the challenge for me remains is that I think resale will continue to scale because we're also seeing consumers change their minds. Buying a luxury handbag or a luxury watch or a luxury car is an investment. It's no longer just an asset I'm buying. I don't, if you buy luxury, in most cases, you are placing a bet that the item that you have bought is going to have a price increase for the duration of the ownership. And that means that that we need to ensure that the consumer can easily find what they need from a luxury store. But I still think that luxury should be, there should be certain things that should not be online, because the challenge is that we also have an oversupply. So the thing that makes luxury work is that luxury has used geographic locations as a way to ensure that they control the supply of goods. But because of platforms being all around the world, you see people importing products from all over the world to ensure that they can sell it. So these brands have huge things that they need to solve. So for me is it's almost like what's happening in Europe, in the sense that in Europe you have one market. These fashion businesses need to understand that they are global brands, and because they are global brands, their products are going to be sold wherever people can find them. The challenge for me remains is that these luxury businesses and brands don't want to engage with these platforms because they don't know who their customers are unless they are using a concierge service, because some people do that. But if you're a brand and your customer data is being held by somebody else, you have to ask the question, Carlos, what do these people do? And that's one of the large challenges. I think we are going to see, I'm going to make a prediction here. I believe we'll see in the next 12 months, we will see Vestiaire Collective from Europe going public or being acquired. It's either or at the moment, because I just think that when you start taking venture capital, you start the clock, and people want their money back. But also, when you have the macroeconomic climate that we currently have, people aren't going to buy luxuries because they have other things that they need to buy, because it's just there is less disposable incomes. One of the most interesting things I'm seeing in the United States now is that we are seeing the high-end consumer that has large amounts of disposable income. They shop online at Walmart, and they go to Walmart as well. So the differentiation of the consumer is also happening in real time because of the costs.
So yeah, I think just one thing to clarify here, also for my education and for our audience. I think in terms of luxury, when you talk about luxury, and that's how I would divide this segment into, like,
Yeah,
maybe premium brands and ultra luxury, because
yeah,
in here, like in Brazil, like there's never a crisis. They're the ones making most money. They know how to surf the crisis, so they never have an issue, right?
yeah,
Financially speaking.
yeah,
And who consumes premium brands, then they have disposable income, but I think they're becoming more conscious. That's how I'm just sharing my thoughts here, because for the, let's say, if you consume if you're like a Philippe Patek guy, like you like this ultra rare
Yeah,
stuff, you know, like
yeah.
that is indeed an investment. And do you see that in that segment of the market, the ultra luxury exclusive brands, they are also going through some challenges compared to the premium brands?
Oh, definitely. So
All
for
right.
me, the sector that I'm very interested in is the luxury watch space. And the
Mhm,
luxury watch space, that entire sector has seen less transactions because of the tariffs. They are seeing
mhm,
less. They are seeing less um, buying new products because of the fact that there's so many platforms that you can buy pre-owned not smartwatches with technology, but premium luxury watches.
mhm,
So in all of these sectors, the genie is outside the bottle. And I don't
mhm,
think the genie is going to be coming back to the bottle because of the fact that there's so much inventory available
mhm,
outside these brands. So to answer your point, I think your distinction about ultra luxury and premium luxury is a really good one. And I think the challenge that we as a sector have is that we've kind of bundled them together, and
mhm,
they are not the same, in the sense that, to your point about, the ultra luxury platforms, they'll be fine. Those brands will be
mhm,
totally fine because they have relationships with their customers. They have a concierge available for that
mhm.
customer to buy and get him or her whatever they need.
Let's move on to let's see here your point on advertising payments and agentic models, and then we'll wrap this up. So let me just see. Regarding payments, you quote Mastercard saying agentic commerce is here. Well, agentic commerce as well. I want to move a little bit away about, we spoke about agentic commerce, so not speak more of the same just in payments. Let's talk about Latin America and Africa in terms of marketplaces. TikTok, your expectations. So you mentioned Mercado Libre beat revenue but missed net income expectations. TikTok in Mexico grew 34 times in 8 months. So how should commerce leaders think about growth versus profitability in emerging regions today?
So that is, I think, the question that you have just asked is, I think, the question that is inside Latin American brands, and that is the question. I think to I think what we are seeing with nascent markets like Latin America and Africa, we we are seeing the impact of these Chinese cross-border platforms who have made cheap goods available. We just need to be honest. And I think in most markets in Latin America, I know Brazil and I know Mexico have placed additional tariffs on them to ensure that there's a fair like market. But I think as a brand, you need to understand that there is significant competition between these businesses. So if you think, I think about, when I think about Latin America, I think of Brazil, not because Gustavo and Carlos is from Brazil, but because the fact that the Brazilian e-commerce market is essentially the most important market for brands in Latin America to win in. So what are we
Mhm,
seeing in that space at the moment? We are seeing Shopee, AliExpress, and the Chinese platforms investing significantly, whether it's through partnerships or whether
mhm,
it's through investment in facilities. So Shopee, I think, has 13 or 14 warehouses in Brazil. But what they are doing is that they're inadvertently forcing Mercado Libre to spend significant capital in offering shipping for lower thresholds of purchases. They are
mhm,
forcing them to, um, you know, offer rebates and coupons and promotions, because what this is doing is they are pushing down the pricing because of the fact that these platforms have so many eyeballs. So I think if you're a brand in an emerging market, one, you should understand that the next 12 months is going to be very, very disruptive, if not more disruptive. I think we are going to see more and more cross-border Chinese platforms be available to local markets. So Temu have opened their market to South Africa with a third-party warehouse. So I'm expecting sometime in the next 12 to 18 months, they'll most probably allow local sellers to sell by it as well. So to answer your question, I think brand leaders need to understand that from a profitability standpoint and margin, you are going to be squeezed, and you need to make a decision with regards to, are you going the Mercado Libre way, where we are saying we are building long-term relationships and we don't mind spending, and we believe that we own a large chunk of the market and consumers are going to stick with us? Or are you aware that your margins are being crunched by Shopee and other platforms because of the availability of cheaper goods? That is the conversation that needs to be had. I don't think people understand the huge volume of goods that are moving between China and Africa and Latin America via airlines. I don't think that's the case. But I also think that the emerging markets, South Africa, Turkey, Brazil, Mexico, these were the first markets to basically have regulation, put additional tariffs on these platforms to negate their economic impact. Because we have to remember that in most economic markets, such as emerging ones, that there is a fair degree of manufacturing happening, whether it's apparel, whether it's whatever, and you are getting crushed by these Chinese businesses. So I think if you're a Latin American or an African brand owner or executive, understand that this is a very bloody war that's not going to change anytime soon. I expect that brands need to think about how do they extract maximum revenues from their customers through experiments. I think that's going to be the case. I also am beginning to see the other side of this. So Shopee has closed operations in Chile. So I think having and being available in multiple markets on a continent such as Latin America or Africa or Southeast Asia, I think is going to become increasingly important for brands to ensure that they get access to more consumers wanting to buy their goods. Because the challenge is that with these low price platforms from China, it's borderline impossible to compete against them, because consumers have shown us that they are willing to wait. And because they are willing to wait, waiting a week for an item, it's not a big deal. And for the rest of this, I'm honest, I do test buys on Temu and on Shein and others monthly or bi-monthly to learn what they are doing, because I think this is the next generation of commerce in emerging markets. So to answer your question, I think we are seeing downward pressure from these Chinese cross-border marketplaces. We are seeing pressure from local retailers to the marketplaces. So I think it's really important that viewers are aware that Mercado Libre has signed a partnership with, I think the company's name is Casa Bahar. It's the largest electronics retailer in Brazil, and they will now start selling these goods through a partnership, what they've done. So I think we're currently getting closer to that Sun Tzu, that quote about, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I think we are going to see more retailers part with platforms to help them stay afloat. Otherwise, these businesses are going to shut down because consumers are no longer buying from them. Because at the end of the day, Carlos, let's be honest. If you can buy something cheaper somewhere else, why are you not going to buy it? I have this.
Exactly.
I have this conversation with brands often. Sorry. Sorry.
No. Go ahead. But that's the. And again, we'll have to do I think another session just about China, because you cannot talk. We cannot talk about commerce and how the world is going without touching China or politics. Like I just saw something today on LinkedIn. Again, narratives like this guy's from this Danish um, political association for e-commerce. They were celebrating that, oh, now we're gonna have $150 tariff, and on top, but the consumer in Denmark, everything is so expensive that they don't give a shit. They will keep on buying from the Chinese brands, which means, I mean, I never bought from Temu, but I will, eventually. My daughters are asking me, and of course, when you have daughters and they're growing, I rather buy three things from Temu, and if one thing doesn't work, okay, you throw it out. We go into a whole other discussion about sustainability, but in the end, the prices dictate also everything, right? And if you don't have that amount of disposable income, I was just looking while you were speaking, Hendrik, about all the countries that the Chinese brands across verticals are moving into, and I mean, it's really 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 interesting. So here the Google gave me a list: Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, Germany, Spain, and of course they have a strategy for each one of these markets. Like it's really interesting. And I think when you talk about the marketplaces moving and being one of the driving forces when they arrive in a country, you as a brand, like a retailer, you also need to pay attention to that, because otherwise, I mean, they're gonna take the market. You gotta have a strategy to be part of that marketplace where the eyeballs are as well, and then eventually think of how you're gonna capitalize on that and not be not disregard. I think that's the word.
Carlos, one of the things that I just wanted to say before we are done is I think we need to just be very mindful of one thing. If we have regulation of Chinese platforms in Europe and in the US, which I think is going to be the case, what will this lead to? It will lead to what you just said. These platforms are going to double down on Southeast Asia. They are going to double down in Latin America, and they are going to double down in Africa because of trade. What I genuinely am researching is I'm trying to learn as much as possible about these Chinese trade agreements, the Belt and Road Initiative with Europe. I'm trying to learn about that because I don't think people understand that in most cases, these governments have signed deals with the Chinese government to have goods move the other way and both sides. And that is important because I just think that I don't see how we cannot be talking about the impact of China because of, the geopolitics of what's happening in the world. And I think we also need to give the Chinese platforms a lot of credit in the sense that they have shown a new model of commerce that most people thought was not doable, the cross-border play, but now they are morphing or changing into becoming local marketplaces where the local customer can buy goods from local sellers because they have created this immense demand because they've spent billions of dollars on advertising in various markets or on continents. And I just think that regular newsletter readers will know that I believe that at the moment, the two most interesting markets for people to if they want to learn about the future, is to look what's happening in the Middle East with all the Chinese companies, entering that market. And then you also have what's happening in Latin America, because I speak under correction, but I think Magazine Luiza, they have a partnership with AliExpress.
I think they have it.
So the point that I'm trying to make is that these guys these platforms understand that their local market, China, has gone to a complete slowdown. So what are they going to do? They're going to basically move their goods all around the world. And the Belt and Road Initiative is basically going to ensure that things are going to move. I keep telling my clients that I believe that in the next 12 months, we will see significant changes of volumes of goods being shipped from China to Africa towards Latin America, because that's where the consumers are going to be, where they target. And I think Southeast Asia is exactly the same, because we've seen, Lazada partnering with Tmall in China. So you'll be able to buy branded Chinese goods from respectable Chinese brands like Anta, who make, some of the greatest sneakers in the world. That's going to be available to Southeast Asia. So the fact remains is that the Chinese want to move, they want to find growth. And the world outside China is large. So these businesses must find their next growth opportunity. And as I said, if you can offer customers cheaper pricing, then they're going to do it. To your point, when you were saying about the tariffs and costs, we have in South Africa, we have tariffs on goods coming from Shein and Temu. And when I pay those taxes and tariffs, it is still cheaper than buying the same item in a retail store. So what am I going to do as a customer? I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy it where I can find it for the best price.
Hey, man. Hallelujah. This was awesome. Very, very cool. Hendrik, I actually think we should do this, more of this, perhaps have some sort of cadence every second week, or whenever you release the newsletter, every second, third week. I think it would be good. Let's wrap this up. So if people want to find your newsletter and more about yourself, what's the best way, Hendrik?
So the best way to find me at the moment is LinkedIn. Carlos, I have put the URL for the latest episode into the comments, so you can link to that. The Evolve community, folks, I need more conversation. I'm available for conversations. I am amazed at what it is, and as I say, I think being physically in the middle of the world is great, in the sense that I see stories develop in China, move all the way through to the US, and vice versa. So I love having these conversations, because I think these are the conversations that brands need to have. And this is where the future is going to go. Cross-border selling is not going to go away.
Sweet. My friend, thanks very much. See you soon.
Cheers, Carlos.
Cheers.
Cheers.